Hello and welcome to our Monday evening podcast.
The Monday, which used to be the podcast formerly known as the election
The
podcast,
election podcast
which
is
is
now
now,
so-
which is now sort of
Well,
segued, as we now.
I mean,
call
I'm
it,
sure the listeners will let us
into-
know
if they want.
if they don't want any
They don't
more
want any
of this.
more. They'll tell us the market level lies.
But, anyway,
we'll keep going until
This podcast is brought to you by the subscribers of the New European. So thank you to everybody who
God love
subscribes. And there is a great offer for you, which will be cemented halfway through this podcast, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Involving a free edition of Tony Blair's new book on leadership.
Wonderful.
Signed by the man himself.
Signed by the man himself.
Can't do better than that, can you? But we are, Matt, we're talking about two things this Monday. We're talking about, first of all, Germany.
Yes,
And then we're going to talk about Oasis.
we are.
But let's kick off with Germany.
Well,
shall we?
Germany is interesting and worrying because what we've seen over the weekend is a couple of very important regional elections in Germany, and not something that would necessarily make huge headlines in the UK under normal circumstances. But what's happened is that the far right AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, finished first in Thuringia. And that is a rather gloomy milestone because it's the first time since 1949 that a far-right party has won a regional election in Germany, and they came second, the AfD, in Saxony, only just behind the traditional centre-right CDU party. And there's another regional election coming in Brandenburg on the 22nd of September. So things are very much up in the air. This is sort of important on all sorts of levels. I mean, first of all, Olaf Scholz, in whom Keir Starmer has been investing a lot of time, and with a view to an Anglo-German treaty. He's the Chancellor of Germany, and all three of his parties in his coalition, the SPD, the Greens, and the Liberals, performed very badly. And there are federal elections next September in 2025. So Scholz is now looking very weak, and just on a kind of geopolitical level, a weak Germany is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Europe, the world needs a strong Germany.
Yeah.
Always has, and it's an industrial giant, and it's become more important in the world of defence. So that's bad.
Yeah.
But obviously, the sort of headline is the deeply alarming continued rise of the AfD. And I remember when we talked to our wonderful New European columnist Tanit Koch about this in January, when there were some rather inspiring counter demonstrations against the AfD in Germany. She made a very interesting point, which was, yes, the AfD was rising, but it hadn't found a Nigel Farage figure.
Yeah.
It didn't have a sort of charismatic, demagogic leader at the time. And what's worrying about this latest round is that it looks like they might have
This Bjorn
Hocker,
Yeah.
who is
the history teacher.
a history teacher with he's a really nasty piece of
Yeah,
work.
he's a history teacher who claims to have very little knowledge of Nazi history, doesn't he?
That's right. I mean, he's been fined for using Nazi language. He's the leader of the AfD in Thuringia, and he is, in a way that the official leaders of the national leaders of the AfD aren't. Alice Weidel is one of them, and she's a sort of slightly counterintuitively a gay, former Goldman Sachs, rather sober, sensible sounding figure, not a skinhead thug at all. Bjorn Höcke is absolutely, he's an ethno-nationalist, beer keller demagogue.
He knows what he's doing. He was convicted for using Nazi language. He made a speech where there was a procession of phrases he used about all for this, all for that, all for that, and he ended with "Alles für Deutschland,"
which is
all for Germany, which was an SA phrase. And he claims that he didn't know that, and the court found he did know it. And then he claims, well, even if I did know it, what's important is to push the boundaries of language, so a sort of First Amendment style kind of absolute free speech sort of thing. But the point is, you and I and the courts and the media, and we all get lost in these sort of intellectual arguments about, well, what is the harm? What's the relative harm? What's the purpose of him saying that? But the truth is, when he says it, the
what
same
he means.
way that when Trump says these kind of things, God's with us and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how we intellectualize it; it's being received loud and clear by people who are ready to bark.
There are no two words more bland than America first.
Right.
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 I mean, that just sounds sort of like a statement of very mild patriotism, right?
Yeah.
Except that when Trump says it and MAGA people say it, what they mean is, white ethnic nationalism. So you're right, the context is all, and this guy, boy, context matters. And so what's interesting when you look at the AfD, I think, is that you're seeing a kind of convergence around the world of, and this has been particularly sharp, I think, since COVID, of a kind of agenda for the hardcore right-wing populist movements. And it's sort of anti-immigration, anti-multiculturalism, anti-Islam, anti-Ukraine war, very important, anti-COVID measures, anti-net zero, anti-elites, anti-globalization, anti-wokery. Yeah. Now, all of this will ring a bell with anyone who's followed Reform or Donald Trump's MAGA or the National Rally in France or Orban in Hungary. I mean, it's the same playbook.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a playbook that it's not of the 21st century. This is a playbook that is repeated time and time again throughout the ages.
It is, but what's worrying is how it's evolving. Since 2016, if you take 2016 as kind of the start point, I guess, of this becoming, with Brexit and Trump, a kind of huge global worry, it has gone through further iterations, and every time people said this, right, we've got hold of it now.
Yeah.
It morphs, and I'm particularly struck by the way in which COVID sort of has changed it a bit, because it's brought in people who have a kind of conspiratorial view of what the government is doing to them via vaccinations. They saw the measures during the pandemic as being a kind of dry run for some sort of totalitarian world government, and it sounds silly when you say it out loud, but there's no doubt this is now a motive in mainstream politics. I suppose that's the point.
It's so scary because Tanit's written a brilliant piece for this
Very
week.
good
I mean,
piece,
it's only, I think it's like 800 words or so, but within it is crystallized so much wisdom about how we've got here.
It's really good.
And the startling and perhaps the scariest thing she says in it is that of the people that voted for AfD in this election, they're not all neo-Nazi, fascist, racist lunatics at all. In fact,
but they never are.
Most of them are just pissed off, and they're pissed off about one thing mostly, which is immigration, which they think they in principle, because you go back to 2016, and the vast majority of Germans were very supportive of the mass influx of immigrants into Germany, very supportive.
Yes.
But where they've been let down is by Merkel in the first instance, and subsequently by people not addressing the consequences of that influx or preparing society for that influx properly, and just saying, well, this is the kind of people we are. These are our values. Well, that's fine, but and you can rub this on Brexit as well. Values only get you so far.
Yes,
the reality on the ground for people is if they are seeing communities changing and seeing isolated incidents being magnified and amplified on social media to scare them.
So one of the kind of symmetries that leapt out to me was that there was this awful mass stabbing in Soligan on August the 23rd allegedly by a Syrian man allegedly connected to ISIS. 3 died, 8 injured. And the way it was weaponized by the AfD was almost identical to the way in which the Reform and Tommy Robinson and so on weaponized the actually very different tragedy at Southport, which had nothing in common. It wasn't, as far as we can see, it had any terrorist.
But it almost doesn't matter, does it? These days,
it doesn't matter. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's that's what I mean. I guess is that you find a dramatization of what you want to claim is the problem, and you build it up on social media, and you manufacture stories, ideas around it, and then you build it up into all immigrants are doing. Immigrants are criminals in the way that Trump says all immigrants coming through the southern border come from prisons or mental institutions and so on. And so what you are seeing is that there is a kind of global playbook now, and everyone involved. There are variants, of course, from country to country, but it's kind of cementing into a kind of quite standard, approach, and quite an effective one. And I guess, I mean, to your point, what's interesting to me and worrying is that there are stirrings of a kind of centre-left response to all this, a progressive response. Starmer won a big majority. In America, we're watching Kamala Harris and Tim Walz kind of developing their response to Trumpery. But if we're honest, it's pretty empty carb so far,
mate,
isn't
this is where I am getting increasingly worried about, and not to over dramatize the potential for stuff to go really horribly wrong, to take a really, really nasty turn, like historically nasty turns.
I know exactly what you mean.
But I am worried that the response is about how do we, Schultz has come out today and said we need to put a firewall between the AfD and acceptable politics.
So you don't let them
ignore them, don't let them touch it.
I understand that.
Yeah, I get it, but that is not the issue. The issue is addressing the problems that made the 50% of people who aren't the hardcore right-wingers feel like the AfD was the only thing they could vote for to affect change. That it's the issue that we've got to challenge, not the politics.
I mean, there's so much that I think could be said. I mean, for example, some of the areas that voted heavily for the AfD don't have many migrants in them. Secondly, actually, Eastern Germany, due to a lot of flight of young people, is badly in need of migrant labour. Ironically enough. And what we're not seeing in any of these countries is an attempt to combine a decent administrative system at borders with an argument that explains migration. None of these governments now are saying why you need it to control it. Why we, understand that unrestrained migration is a strain on any society, but that's not what we're talking about. And leaving the argument completely to the other side to frame and define.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. I do feel, however, that we're getting to a point now where politicians talk about the need to understand and educate. We talk about the educating people. I think people feel deeply patronised about that. And they feel, take your education, shove it up your arse, and come and fix the fact that I've got these problems up my high street, or I don't recognise the town I grew up in anymore. And as much as and I'll be totally honest here, in 2016, when Brexit happened, a big part of me felt like here's the split. This talk about open-minded versus closed-minded, and all of it was some kind of philosophical difference. And I don't think it was at all. I think it was just lived experience difference. Why was Liverpool remain and Sunderland leave? I think it's because of lived experience. Liverpool very visibly benefited from the European Union. In fact, it was saved by the European Union when Thatcher wanted to shut it down.
A port city.
Sunderland never had that. It never had that sense of we've got somebody on our side. So. But it's not the people of Sunderland's fault. It's a perfectly rational response. It's not the people of Saxony's fault that they feel like that they've got to turn to. It's a failure of mainstream politics that they feel they've got to do this. But what terrifies me, Matt, is that it's precisely the same failure of mainstream politics that we've seen time and time again. And things get worse and worse and worse. Scary worse. And that's where I wonder. We constantly feel like, well, maybe we're getting to the crunch now. We're fighting fascism. I don't think we're anywhere close to the crunch.
I don't think the centre-left parties have even really picked up their metaphorical rhetorical policy weapons,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, look at France. France has not, it's 2 months now since it's been unable to form a government.
Yeah.
So Macron called those snap elections, the Marine Le Pen National Rally came top in the first round, and then there was a very sort of swift realignment and organisation so that it couldn't win the second round. But this produced a very complicated result, and Macron said, well, let's not form a new ministry until after the Olympics. And here we are, 2 months on, and there is still only a caretaker government. Now, your point about lived experience, that will completely solidify the sentiment of those who voted National Rally. It says, okay, so you all organised it, you gerrymandered it so that we couldn't form a ministry, and now you haven't even formed one of your own.
And this is what Scholz is doing in a slightly nuanced way in Germany today, saying, put a firewall up between them. All those people saying, fuck off, we've just voted for them, and you're saying you're going to firewall them. Sorry, mate.
It's very, I mean, you have to be very careful, I think, in this whole argument about claiming that or defining democracy as what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Or that there's a right version of it.
There's a right
just
version
because it suits you,
Yes. I mean, it's much harder than that. I mean, the failure, and it's a planetary failure, it's a global failure, is to present things like net zero, migration, pluralism or multiculturalism, whichever you want, in ways that are sympathetic to people's sense of belonging and tradition and home. Without in any way appeasing the sort of Tommy Robinson mentality of homeland or blood and soil, any of that evil stuff. But nonetheless, there's a kind of technocracy to the centre-left globally at the moment, which I think is very worrying. And I don't know if you saw the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz interview.
Yeah, did you?
I mean, it was both extremely professional. Neither of them dropped the ball at all.
Yeah.
They were word perfect. And I came away knowing nothing.
Yeah.
I came away feeling, yep, you'd probably be a very good president and vice president, and you're certainly better than Trump.
Yeah.
But what have I actually learned about, her response to the question about fracking was, my values haven't changed. Well, that's silly. I mean, her policy has changed, and it would be much better if she'd said, you know what, I thought this, and then I changed my mind.
Why are they so terrified of? Is it or let me reframe that. Who are they so terrified of by admitting the most human characteristic, which is to say, "Oh, I might have been wrong about that." Or
well, I suppose
who were they terrified of?
To be fair, I mean, they're facing an orange maniac surrounded by maniacs.
Yeah,
and I think their misconstrued deduction is we can't put a foot wrong.
Yeah.
And so they are almost pathologically risk averse. Now, the point to make in that context is, okay, so you're not facing the abyss, which you were with Joe Biden, fine. But equally, there hasn't been a convention bounce. No. It's still a tie.
And it's binary. It's like win or lose.
Win or lose.
It's not like, okay, you're going to be the leader of the opposition.
No.
You're going to be nobody.
You're going to be nobody. And, let's face it, Trump has had a fairly rotten last few weeks, flailing around, not really knowing how to deal with her. And the debate, the first and perhaps only debate between the two of them, is on September the 10th, ABC News. Now, he could blow that, but so could she. And what I slightly worry about in the American context is that because the convention was so beautifully choreographed, and it was amazing, it was a sensational piece of showmanship and political choreography, that there's this sense of, well, now we've won,
which is mad.
And that's not right. I mean, the system in America, as we've said a million times, is so tightly geared. 10,000 votes here, 10,000 votes there. Pennsylvania is still on a knife edge. You really can't win without Pennsylvania. Yeah. Trump is down in Georgia, or Trump's people are down in Georgia, menacing the electoral officials. It could be fine, but it isn't fine yet. And there is 2 months to go.
Yeah.
Now that's America. Now, in Germany, you're looking at probably not. There's absolutely no imminent risk of a AfD federal government. That's not in the tea leaves at the moment. But what is happening is that old politics is fragmenting. So a sort of side note to all this, which I found very interesting, is that there's this new far left party that was only set up a few months ago called Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, and it's basically a cult of personality. Sarah Wagenknecht, is a left winger who's left the traditional far left party and has founded this party, and it's won 15% in both Saxony and Thuringia from a standing start.
Amazing,
which is a bit like Reform, but on the left.
But it shows the power of a personality.
And what's interesting about her is that yes, she's left wing in lots of ways, but she's anti-immigration,
right?
Socially conservative, and crucially, and this keeps coming up now. I'm very interested in the way it's sort of starting to become a theme for the populist right. She's very strongly against the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
What she and the AfD have in common is this view, hang on a minute, we're in the middle of Europe. Why are we antagonizing Putin? Does no one remember what happened last time?
Yeah.
And at a moment when, with America, Democrat or Republican, America is undoubtedly detaching itself from the world a bit. We need a really strong Germany in a European defence identity.
And by the way, again, sorry to be the bore in the room, but if it wasn't for bloody Brexit, then how much stronger would that European message be with one of the military forces of Europe, the UK, at that table saying there's an absolute wall here, Vlad, fuck off.
I mean, it's tragic, isn't it, that Starmer has to go over to Germany to in the hope that before Scholz leaves his job, there'll be an Anglo-German identity which can strengthen defence identity on a bilateral basis.
And Brussels has said, on your bike, mate.
On your bike, mate.
Because you're not going to pick us off one by one. It's not going to happen.
No,
and the Germans won't let it happen.
And the Germans won't let it happen. So I think on that and on many other ways, I mean, German politics is clearly, we've been very used to the post-war miracle of a kind of centrism based on a never again, hatred of the Nazi past, moving away from it. And I don't think, it's heading back to Nazism. I think that's too simplistic. But what is certainly true is that a lot of the genies are now coming out of the bottle for different reasons. And it's, you mentioned Scholz saying we must, just not let the AfD into government, and the CDU has this rule that, it can't align itself with far right parties and so on. Or indeed far left parties. But, that is just a rule. It doesn't solve anything.
That's right.
And what worries me sort of holistically in all of this is that there's a lot of procedure and technicality and technocracy being used to deal with as a kind of provisional means of keeping very, very deep-seated problems at bay that are going to get worse.
Yeah. But, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think, again, coming back to it, this idea from politicians and media people like us, where we can talk about fighting the far right and presenting an argument against fascism and all of this business, but that doesn't address. That is not the right conversation to have. That's a distraction. It's a mitigation. It's palliative. It's letting ourselves off the hook.
It's virtue signaling.
We're not dealing with the problems.
The really hard yards in all of this. I mean, Obama, I think, was the first person to say, watch out, because Trump is a symptom, not a cause.
Exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you want to beat Trump and his successors, who are many around the world, they are legion, you've got to dig down and find out what that involves. Now, the far right will always blame migrants. And by the way, they're going to start blaming robots soon as well. Yeah. That's one to watch.
Yeah.
But the centre-left progressives have to come up with more than it was all the Tories' fault. That's right. They're fascists, they're Nazis. Yeah, they are. Yeah. But, the other thing is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Okay, well, look, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Politics. But let's come and talk after the break about one of the things that Labour thinks is very important to address right now in this maelstrom, the price of Oasis tickets.
Yeah.
See you in a minute.
The big stuff.
So Matt, how did you get on? What did you do on Saturday? Because I'll tell you what I did first. I spent 9 hours.
Friday, mate.
Sorry,
Friday, mate. It was Friday.
So you were one of the lucky ones, the blessed ones, weren't you?
Yeah. No, I have to admit that I was very lucky, and on Friday night got some tickets, so I was very, very happy.
Yeah, and I am equally as joyful because you sent me a lovely message saying, "Would you like to come with me?" And
yeah,
I would.
It's the least I could do.
So, folks, let's announce that the two Matts will be live at Wembley
on
July the 26th.
We're mad for it.
We're mad for it.
We're officially mad.
We're going to be live at Wembley with 100,000 people.
So that's the smug preamble, right, to our serious discussion.
But it was a bizarre day. I mean, so my experience was doing the whole 6 browser screen, all this crap, and waiting 9 hours, 140,000 people ahead of me. And when we finally got in after 9 hours waiting, there was one blue seat left on the Wednesday gig at Wembley.
Yeah.
And of course we wanted 4 seats like normal people do. So we passed it up. So I didn't even get as far as finding out how much that seat was. But obviously, I think if I'd have clicked on it, it would have already gone. And my sister-in-law's experience, and the face value of the seats was 76 quid.
Yes.
She ended up paying, and I haven't heard a magnification on this scale elsewhere in the media. She ended up paying £496 per ticket.
That is quite dynamic.
That is some dynamic pricing.
Yes.
And so my view on that, she's now got regret about buying. I've said to her, look, what else are you going to be doing on that Thursday
Once
night?
in a generation.
You might as well go and see it and enjoy it. But she says quite rightly, if she had woken up that morning and to be told that she was going to pay the best end of 1,000 quid for 2 lousy seats in the third tier of this stadium to see Oasis, she'd have gone back to bed. But she was there, the pressure was on, the clock was ticking down, everything psychologically was, you've got to get it, She'd been on there for 7 hours, so she clicks buy. Now, is she right? Is she wrong to feel aggrieved?
Here's the problem is that the two hemispheres of my brain react entirely differently to this whole experience, right? Yeah. The sensible thing that used to write editorials for the Times and all that, very serious, and dynamic pricing, and they should look. The one thing that they should have done at the start, I think, which would have been made life a lot easier, would be to have been transparent about the fact that the prices as advertised during the week before, the days before, were not actually going to necessarily be the prices you paid.
Yeah.
Because dynamic pricing, which is just a fancy name for the surge pricing you have on Uber cars or for airline tickets or hotels at peak times, prices go up radically. Yeah. Is nothing new. What was new was for people to discover this in real time as they were in a queue with 14 million people, right? So I understand totally the sense of grievance about that, and I think I'm glad it's being looked into. I'm not, but this is where I'm going to go to the other hemisphere of my brain. Okay, so trigger warning to everyone who's feeling sore about. So, Lisa Nandy has announced a review. Really? Yeah. Right? We've just had the handover of power.
Yeah.
14 years of Conservative rule. What have we got so far? Smoking ban in pub gardens, right? And a review into the Gallagher brothers, right? And no doubt soon a review into the tensile strength of paperclips. The 3 big issues. That's what I call a mission-led government.
So that's right. So what I can't get over is that this Labour government, with this stonking majority, do anything it wants.
Yes.
Won't countenance re-examining Brexit.
No
or
way.
The single market or the customs union.
The very thought.
But at the drop of a hat, we'll hold an inquiry into the prices of Noel and Liam's tickets.
But I'm afraid my annoyance goes further. So
bring it.
You can stop me when I go too far.
No, I won't.
All right. Well, there's something. Underpinning this sense that somehow it's improper. The price surge, the dynamic pricing thing, I think is completely legitimate. But it was lurking before it even started. Was a sort of resentment that it's improper for a band of Oasis, even of Oasis, they're arguably the greatest band in the world, right? Yeah. To charge a hefty fee for their tickets. Now, we live in a world where people fork out 900 quid for an iPhone, right?
Yeah.
Or £2,000 for a season ticket, right?
Yeah.
Or much worse, 180 quid for an Ed Sheeran ticket, right? Now,
I suppose on that scale, then,
right?
Yeah, it makes it look a bargain.
And Adele's tickets in Munich were going for €400, right? So get out of my face.
But shouldn't they have just said, look, the tickets are going to be 250 quid each?
Yeah, yes, but here's the point, right? Which is that underpinning this, I mean, they've been away, Oasis, since 2009, right? And we're now in 2024.
Suddenly making up for it.
What has happened in that period? We have become a country that complains at the drop of a hat, right? And I include, by the way, Brexit.
Right.
Is the biggest complaint in the history of Britain. It's like, oh, I don't like that, right? I'm not having that, right?
So, and I've got the receipt.
You see, it's always the left that are blamed for grievances. And it's true that, I mean, look, if it hadn't, there'd have been some microaggression involved with the shape of the ticket or something if it hadn't been the price, right?
Yeah.
So the left would have had a problem too. But in the period that Oasis have been away, they're going to be very surprised, the nation they come back to, because
I don't think they've been cryogenically frozen for the last 15 years.
But they haven't been this prominent, right? They've been spending time on social media slagging each other off and doing moderately okay solo work, right? And now they're at the centre of the social conversation again. And I think they might find it's a bit different from Cool Britannia, right?
Yeah.
Because it's complain supernova, right? And I think what there is, I mean, I am half joking, but there is a point here about music, which is it's 30 years since Definitely Maybe came out, Oasis's debut album, and I remember going to HMV and forking out $14.95 for the CD.
Right.
I can remember that day.
Wow. Yeah.
Now music is free.
Yeah.
And everyone assumes that that's fine. Music, of course it is. I mean, why wouldn't it be free?
Another one of the entitled generation's gifts, isn't
it? We all use it, so it's not just the kids. But so bands, of whom Oasis are by far the biggest and greediest, right?
Yeah.
Make their money back by doing long tours with multiple gigs, and that's how. And all bands.
So here's another challenge though to your largesse when it comes to their bank account, which is they're going to add more dates.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
And so there's going to be loads of people who've paid 500 quid a ticket who will watch their mates get tickets for 76 quid.
But you know what? This is we're acting like this is the NHS, right?
But shouldn't there be some fairness?
A measure of fairness, of course, and I agree that things got out of hand. But we're not talking about hip replacements or oncology appointments here, right? We're talking about tickets to Oasis. Let's get things under control.
So are you saying that if you don't want to go, you don't have to go?
No, I'm not saying anything quite like that, because I do think that it was badly handled. What I am saying, though, is the way that it's become sort of the dominant theme of the nation's conversation this week, which is, oh God, how did that happen?
Did you see that article by that guy in the Guardian?
Oh, Simon Price,
Simon Price,
saying that they were the worst
with the
cultural
funny hair.
force, and that he had two little horns on his little horns on his head.
But this piece, it was one of the worst pieces of music journalism I've ever read.
So
in my
I
life.
Just said, they're incredibly evil, which I'm sure delighted them. It's the best thing that's happened to them for a while, journalistically. But and another thing, and I'm here I really am sticking my neck out, and this could be my last appearance on any podcast.
Is this going to be the one, Matt? This is going to be.
No, well, here's the thing, right?
So boring.
I remember only a few weeks ago, right? Taylor Swift was charging £1 million a ticket.
I remember her,
and the world was full of Queen,
absolutely right,
Slay, she's taken $7 billion around the world.
We've got friends who practically took out a mortgage to go and see
and that was all apparently fine, that was for some reason okay, because it involved friendship bracelets and
girl power
and girl power is a lovely thing. We're in favour of girl power on the two mats. However, we're also in favour of mank power, right?
Steady.
All right. North
We're
of
just
England,
coming off the back of a Liverpool 3-0 win at Old Trafford.
That was ill.
I need to get in.
That was ill judged by me. But let's say North of England power, whatever you choose your epithet. And they've come back and they're 51 and 57. One of them's got a divorce to pay for, right? Yeah. So, and
Fair
suddenly,
play.
and well, yeah, but
so my sister-in-law has to pay for it, is what you're saying?
Well, what I'm just saying is, why are hatred bracelets worse than friendship bracelets, right? I just don't understand. Can someone explain? I would be very grateful if one of the listeners of our podcast could explain to me why Taylor Swift fleecing a grateful nation, right, is okay.
And I know, by the way, we're both old farts, but I can name about 30 Oasis bangers right now.
Yes.
I can't name 2 Taylor Swift songs.
Well, you should shake it off.
Is that a reference?
It is a reference,
okay.
Right? But here's the thing: is it okay? I just want a level fucking playing field, right? Is it okay for top acts to fleece a grateful nation, right? Or is it not? Okay, that's all. That's all I ask.
I think yes, and I think yes is the answer, and I think it's the dynamic pricing was the problem.
Yeah,
where you felt like someone had got a gun against your head.
I have a horrible feeling that because they are unlovable swaggy tops, right? Yeah. And they say stupid things and all the rest of it, that something was going to be wrong.
They should have come out,
the locations, the venues.
They should have come out and said
the fact they didn't use pink in the fucking ticket. Whatever it was, something would have been wrong.
Of course, but they should have fronted it up, and they should have come out and said, it's going to be 300 quid a ticket, and if you don't like it, then just fuck off.
I agree.
And then everyone would have gone, oh, that's so great, Oasis.
That's
Where do we send the check?
That's so brat, right? So anyway, that's Matt's rant for the week. I now feel much better, and I feel at peace.
That's good. Well, look, I think it's been a nice distraction, but I mean, since this is a political podcast, we should bring it back to what the hell is going on in the world where this is the main topic of conversation of the Labour government for a day. I know. Well, to be fair, we've also got the schools, Ofsted.
They can't use one word.
You can't use. So there's another massive, and I'm sure that is a massively consequential thing, but there are bigger issues out there.
There are quite a lot of bigger issues. I mean, the NHS. Our place in Europe.
Place in Europe.
The rise
solve
of
a lot of problems.
The possibility of a second Trump presidency, the decline of NATO, climate.
And stop being so fucking miserable.
Climate change,
I mean, honestly, Keir, smile, cheer up, son.
Look, get on with it.
Yeah. The world's your lobster, mate.
The world is your lobster.
You've got the whole thing there. It's your play set. It's your train set.
This time next year, Rodney, we're going to be millionaires.
You've got to be mad for it. You've got to roll with it.
You've got to roll with it. And I just think, if there's one lesson we can take away from the Oasis experience, other than the fact that they are apparently evil, it is that the spirit that they represented, and may not represent it, we'll have to see. We shall see next year when we go and see them. Was something good, and it had a confidence about it, and it was no accident that Blair tried to catch that lightning in a bottle. He didn't necessarily succeed.
Well, we talked about it in our 2012 podcast that spirit is now absent from Britain,
it's dead.
We need to get it back.
Now, it may not be brought back by 250-something plutocrats, right, who have just taken everyone's money.
He might have just at the last puff of the cigar.
The last money. Do you remember we were talking about quantitative easing in the Q&A, right?
Wait till Rachel Reeves' budget. I'm
afraid it's worse than I thought. The black hole.
They'll be in the Bahamas. They'll be in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily we need to worry too much about them. But I do think that we need to worry about a government that feels that it has to respond immediately to something like this, which is obviously soluble, and you're right. Dynamic pricing should be at the very least advertised, right?
Great.
And that's my last word on the matter.
That's my last word. So thank you for bearing with us, non-Oasis fans. But I hope you'll get your tickets.
Yeah, get your tickets.
You will. I'm sure there'll be more dates. There's loads of gaps in the Wembley states, so don't lose hope.
It's always. I mean, I had a friend of mine said he would sell a kidney.
Oh, really?
Yes. I mean, actually, it is amazing how desperate people were to get tickets. I mean, I was interested because obviously being of a certain age, I was desperate to get tickets, but I'm fascinated by how big a demand.
But it is also one of those phenomena where we all go mad for a little while, don't we? I mean, we have all gone collectively nuts over Oasis in the last 72 hours.
Yes.
And now we're all kind of coming off the high a little bit,
Well, I'm still furious, so even though I'm extremely glad for tickets.
Right, brilliant. All right, enough. Thank you for putting up with us for the last hour. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back on Friday with our regular podcast, although it's absolutely impossible to discern the difference between Monday evenings and Fridays, although our producer still refers to it as the extra one, but it's just the Monday one now. Anyway,
we'll be defending Pulp on Friday.
We'll talk about Pulp, and don't forget your subscription offer. You can go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. That's the number 2 MATTS, and you can get a free copy of Tony Blair's new book on leadership, signed by the man himself. Send any feedback, emails, hatred, love, whatever you want to matts@tnepublishing.com. And thanks as ever to our team at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill. And we'll see you on Friday.
Have a good week.
Have an amazing week.